Hi, I'm Valeri Chukhlomin, Professor of Business and Management at the State University of New York, Empire State College. In my university, I develop and teach online courses in business and marketing strategy for undergraduate and MBA students. I also teach professional development courses for educators from different countries about how to design online courses. Often I'm asked to explain how online learning works in the US. For that purpose, I use an illustrative example that we will see in a minute. To deliver the presentation, I am joined by Robert Kester, an instructional designer in the Center for Distance Learning at the State University of New York, Empire State College.
Hi, I'm Bob Kester, and in my center I do instructional design work in which I collaborate with faculty to design online courses that meet best practices for online courses. I help make sure that courses are easy to use and navigate. In this presentation, we'll demonstrate how new technologies are changing the way colleges and universities approach teaching and learning in American universities. In particular, we'll talk about a shift from teacher-centered to student-centered environments, which is a major change in the philosophy of higher education. Now, you may ask why it is important to talk about the philosophy of higher education in the beginning of this competency-based skill-building course. Why don't we start with a demonstration of some sophisticated, ultramodern technologies? Well, here's an answer. According to our observations, it is not merely the technology that creates problems for incoming students in the first place. More often, problems are caused by unfamiliar environments. And typically, incoming students expect that online courses are organized and function similarly to classes in traditional so-called teacher-centered environments. In reality, many American universities design their online courses to be more like virtual workplaces in order to help students develop 21st century skills. In these so-called student-centered environments, expectations for students' behavior and learning strategies are different. And as we can see, many incoming students are not fully aware of these differences. So the first step to succeed in US virtual and online environments is to explore and understand the underlying logic behind their design, and then to review the required learning strategies and skills. Let's begin with defining what we mean by a teacher-centered environment. This is a highly structured approach to education, where it is the professor who solely has control. In this environment, students are passive followers. They do what they are told to do to be filled up with knowledge. Paul LaCroix's book presented a 16th century class in a traditional face-to-face setting, but many of today's technology-enhanced classes function in a similar way. If a student has only been exposed to teacher-centered environments, she or he may consider it as the most natural way that education is or can possibly be done. We often see in online courses that incoming students come to a virtual class with an expectation that they need to read only the textbook, communicate only with the professor, and be evaluated in the end of the term by answering a multiple-choice quiz. The teacher-centered approach to education is not outdated. Some of today's MOOCs are clearly teacher-centered, even if they use very modern technology. This approach is very deeply rooted in human culture and has its merits, so it is probably not going to disappear anytime soon. But there is a practical need to prepare students for the reality of the 21st century workplace, which is virtual, global, dynamic, and based on collaborative teamwork. To succeed in this kind of work environment, students should be well prepared for independent, self-directed, lifelong learning and be able to continuously scan and effectively evaluate myriad digital learning resources. Teacher-centered environments do not seem to be well suited for the development of 21st century skills, but a different student-centered approach does. This is not a completely novel approach. A painting by Raphael represents a student-centered environment which is believed to be a hallmark of the ancient Greeks' famous School of Athens. In a student-centered environment, students are in charge of their learning. They act independently, test theories, find and utilize available resources, discuss and dispute their findings. The professor's role is to be an intellectual leader and a designer of learning experiences. It's more like being a coach or a consultant or a guide. In a teacher-centered environment, students come in groups and expect to be closely supervised and told what to do and when and how. To do it in a student-centered environment, each student is supposed to act on his or her own, very much like in the workplace. While in the pre-technological era, it was very difficult for individual students to arrange access to resources such as libraries, laboratories, and study rooms, with the arrival of new digital technologies and the internet, the construction of student-centered environments has become easier. Now, to better understand how new technologies help create student-centered learning environments, how those environments function, and what skills are required to effectively operate in those environments, let's consider an illustrative example. As we are not permitted to bring you as observers into a regular online course in a U.S. university, and we do not want to use this opportunity to advocate for a particular college or school, we will be using a fictitious model. And to do so, we'll take an imaginary college where a student-centered approach is practiced, and playing a game of fantasy, move it into the present day. The question is, how could we leverage modern-day technologies to enhance teaching and learning and support student-centeredness? The School of Athens seems to be a good starting point for this exercise. To begin, we can introduce a lecture capturing system and record lectures and discussions, then add transcripts and create a facility for questions and answers. The next logical step would be to use an online platform for all course-related activities. This would include many things, such as databases and electronic communications. The visible part of this technology iceberg will be represented by a learning management system, or LMS. The LMS allows the School of Athens to organize and manage all learning activities and resources within a course. For each particular course, the LMS will create a password-protected website. In our case, let's call this class Philosophy 101. Now let's think about educational technologies, electronic resources, and web-based academic services that the hypothetical School of Athens would most likely have if it were moved to the present day. At a minimum, the school would use an online library with access to databases, various help desk services, and a direct line of communication with the lecturer, an online learning center, a video conferencing system, a lab with simulations, and several systems for academic skills development. In addition, the school would have to establish a set of written rules, policies, and procedures. For example, to specify what standards and formats should be used by students, what constitutes plagiarism, how to prevent it, and who should do what when it happens. Now, we can assemble a mock course homepage for Philosophy 101 in the School of Athens' LMS. The resulting page is a good illustration of how a student-centered approach works in a technology-enhanced setting. Actually, it is very similar to the way many U.S. universities function these days. The main difference from older classrooms is that the classroom is now individualized, virtual, and always accessible. Even if professors and students still meet in physical face-to-face settings, it is now typical that much of the academic work is done by students online. When taking courses, students are required to act independently or in teams, explore and evaluate resources, work on projects, and deliver results in specified formats. In asynchronous online courses, they may not have either lectures or exams, just like in real-life situations. They are only given tasks, requirements, criteria for evaluation, and tight schedules. All technologies that we use in the illustrative example are very common for American universities. Some are exactly the same as those used by companies for communications, teamwork, and workplace training. For example, it's very common for modern companies to use global teams for developing complex projects. Global teams usually use video conferencing and various project management and problem-solving techniques. To master them and effectively use them in real time, one needs lots of practice, and this can be achieved in online courses. To succeed in student-centered, technology-enhanced environments, a student obviously needs to be familiar with modern information and communication technologies. But there are also other components of success that incoming students are sometimes not aware of or underestimate. For example, computer-mediated communications are formal. They require the use of web etiquette and certain formats that students need to know. They are writing intensive and require lots of well-structured, grammatically correct writing. Teamwork is a social interaction. In an online situation, without an ability to read nonverbal cues and body language, conducting an effective communication can be very challenging. Time management, and particularly the concept of a due date, is critically important. It is the student who is responsible for figuring out what, when, and how his or her work should be done. And finally, learning how to learn is the main idea. If you want to read more about student-centered, technology-enhanced environments and related skills, you can start by browsing the following resources. Happy browsing.